Hi and welcome back. In this module, which is module number 9, you will learn about internal punctuation as well as about the end marks. But the first part of this module, we will actually focus on internal punctuation, and our main focus in part number 1 of this lesson is the comma. Now, many students have difficulties with actually knowing when to use commas and when not to use commas. Some students have no idea when to use them, and they start just putting commas wherever they feel like a comma is needed. However, it's not actually where the comma is needed. So it's very important for us to pay attention to the first part of this module on internal punctuation, because our main focus in part number 1 is the comma, because it's so misused in academic formal writing among students in composition courses. So again, I want for us to pay attention to internal punctuation, the comma in particular, for this particular module. Now, there are 8 comma rules to follow when using a comma in a sentence. Our rule number 1 is you need to use a comma before a coordinating conjunction. And in module number 1, under parts of speech, in one of our lessons, I actually introduced you to the 7 coordinating conjunctions. And if you remember correctly, our 7 coordinating conjunctions, we can actually use the acronym FANBOYS to remember them. And that's for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. So again, for module number 1, we learned that the acronym FANBOYS can help us remember those 7 coordinating conjunctions. So we need to use a comma before a coordinating conjunction when joining 2 simple sentences to make 1 compound sentence. In the previous module, we actually learned how to develop compound sentences, so you should be aware of that particular rule already. So let's look at our example. He acts like a child. That's our first sentence, our simple sentence, which is also an independent clause, which is what we learned in another module. So acts is our verb, he is the subject. Yet he longs to be taken seriously. Longs is our next verb, he is our subject of that particular independent or simple sentence. We have these 2 simple sentences being joined by a coordinating conjunction yet. Now, when we do add the conjunction yet, we have to put a comma before the coordinating conjunction. And again, a comma goes before that conjunction if the 2 phrases or clauses that are being joined together are independent clauses. So when you have 2 sentences being joined together by a conjunction, you have to put a comma before that conjunction. Now, rule number 2 when using commas, do not use a comma before a coordinating conjunction when joining just 2 words, phrases, or joining dependent clauses. For example, both Brittany and Jeremy are studying in the library. If you notice, I have my conjunction and, that's joining Brittany and Jeremy. I don't have a comma before the and because I'm not joining 2 independent clauses here. I'm just joining 2 words together. So no comma is needed before the and. Let's take a look at rule number 3 when we use commas. Use commas between items in a series, and a series is a list of 3 or more items in a sentence or a word group. Let's look at our example. John, Zach, or Stephen will be elected president of the student organization. I have 3 people I'm listing: John, Zach, Stephen. So between all of these names that I'm listing, I need commas, a comma after John and a comma after Zach. And I still need a comma, even though I have or Stephen, a conjunction, right before the last name that I'm mentioning in my series. I still need a comma before that conjunction or. Now, my 4th comma rule is you need to use a comma to separate introductory words from the main sentence. My examples are here. Well, I'm not sure what he meant by that remark. Now, I have the word well. That's kind of separate. It's actually introducing the main sentence. So I do need a comma after that introductory word well. Now my next example, Rob, did you find my backpack? I'm actually specifically addressing someone, Rob, before I actually ask the question. So I do need a comma after that person's name. So I need a comma after Rob. The third example, in fact, that's my introductory words that I'm introducing my main sentence to. Thoreau spent only one night in jail. Because I have the words in fact, which, if you remember correctly, is a prepositional phrase. Yes, prepositional phrases can be two words. It introduces the independent clause, so I have to have a comma right before that independent clause. And you learned that when we dealt with the other module about run-ons, how to identify and correct run-ons, that I actually showed you that particular rule. Then our last example, in the event of a fire. In the event of a fire is our introductory clause, which is also, by the way, another prepositional phrase. In is the preposition, fire is the object of the preposition. That whole phrase, in the event of a fire, introduces my independent clause. Proceed to the nearest exit. You proceed. I'm given a command, so my understood subject is you. So because I'm introducing my independent clause, I have to have a comma after that introductory phrase, in the event of a fire. Now rule number 5 is use a comma to separate an afterthought from the main sentence. So something like an afterthought is just something that you might add just kind of nonchalantly to the sentence. So our example is class will end early, or so I thought. Or so I thought is my afterthought. It comes after my main sentence, which is my independent clause, so I need a comma to introduce my afterthought. The next example, the movie was long, don't you think? Don't you think is my afterthought. It comes after my main sentence, the movie was long, therefore I need a comma before the afterthought. Then my last example here is he left his entire estate to his children, not his wife. Not his wife is my afterthought coming after my main sentence. Now rule number 6, use commas to set off a word or word group that interrupts the normal flow of a sentence. First example, Jamie left, in fact, only about an hour ago. In fact interrupts the natural flow of my actual sentence, so I need a comma to separate that phrase. Honesty, so they say, is the best policy. So they say is my it interrupts the normal flow of the actual independent clause, so I have a comma before the phrase and I have a comma after the phrase. And come here, Lucy, and look at this. Lucy is my interruption. It interrupts the natural flow of the sentence. Come here and look at this. So I need a comma before the name Lucy and also one right after Lucy. Now we have comma rule number 7. Use a comma after each part of a date or address, even the last part, unless the clause ends with a period, a question mark, or a semicolon. And let's look at my last example of my last comma rule here. Tuesday, May 5th, 1998 was the first Cinco de Mayo we celebrated in the United States. So I have to use a comma after each part of my date. After the actual day of the week, Tuesday, I need a comma to introduce the month, May 5th. After the date, which is the 5th, I need a comma after that. And after the year, to introduce the rest of the sentence, I also need a comma after 1998. Then we have comma rule number 8. Use a comma whenever one is needed to prevent misreading of a sentence. When eating, most children require adult supervision. Now, if you didn't have a comma here and there wasn't a pause there after when eating, I would know if that meant that the most children require supervision or if the adults require supervision. So we're not really sure what's going on. So we need to have a comma after when eating to show the natural pause that introduces our independent clause, most children require adult supervision. So as you can see, the comma, which is our first of our internal punctuation marks, it's a little bit tricky, and it will take you a lot of practice to be able to eliminate these comma mistakes in your academic writing and formal language. So with practice on how to use the comma correctly, you should be able to have good punctuation in your academic writing.